Have you ever built an API only to find your data layer turning into a tangled mess? Entities and DTOs, or data transfer objects, can help you structure your app the right way. In this video, we'll break down how to separate business logic from data representation, making your APIs more maintainable, scalable, and efficient. Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a senior software engineer with years of experience in JavaScript and Node.js. My goal is to help you become a confident and stress-free developer by increasing your skills and proficiency. Let's get started. Often, APIs not only do CRUD, create, read, update, or delete operations, but also perform logic on its data. We are in Task Manager Node.js Express API project, and imagine we have a requirement to set task as completed only if it was not completed before. To do that, we can represent a task as an entity. Entities collocate core data models and related business logic. Besides the task properties, the task entity can also include mark as complete functionality or method. This method will check if the task is already completed. If so, we'll throw an error, otherwise it will complete the task. After a completed task is saved in the database, we will need to return it to the user. That's where DTOs come into play. In an API, DTOs help to control what data is exposed to the client and simplifies the structure of the complex objects. A classic example is when API returns a user object and it needs to exclude the password and other sensitive data. In our case, we want to exclude created at date. Besides excluding certain data, we also may want to add some calculated data, such as priority level. Alright. Let's see how to use entities and DTOs in the code. As usual, the link to the GitHub repository is in the description below. Let's create task.ts file in src data entities folder. The class task is going to implement iTask interface from the repository. We pretty much are going to load data from the repository into the task entity. Therefore, we will create the task fields and initialize them in the constructor. Next, let's create a method mark as completed. It will check if completed on already has value. If not, it will assign it to today's date. If completed on already has value, meaning it has been completed, the method will throw an error. We will add more code to this class a little bit later, but for now we are done. Let's create a route to mark the task as complete. In src routes we want tasks index.ts file. Let's define a patch method for the route id complete, and a handler function mark task as completed. This handler function doesn't exist yet. Let's import it and define it in the controller. In the controller, let's define async function mark task as completed. In this function, we will call getTask method on the repository to get task data. Now we need to load this data into the task entity. We can just use a constructor we created and map the values that we received from the repository. However, there is an easier way to do it. We can use a package called class transformer. Let's go to its npm page. Class transformer allows you to transform plain object to some instance and vice versa. To install it in Node.js project, we will need to install the library itself and also reflect metadata library. So let's do just that with npm install class transformer and reflect metadata. Also, let's import reflect metadata in src index.ts file as the documentation suggests. Now we can create a task entity by calling plain to instance method and passing to it task and task data that we got from the repository. Let's call mark as completed method on the task instance, persist task in the database by calling update task method on the repository and return the task back in the response. Finally, let's import plain to instance method from class transformer and task from the task entity. And it looks like we got a bit ahead of ourselves and returned the task as DTO. Let's remove this method for now. And we're all set. If you feel like you're learning something new, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Let's spin up the dev server with npm run dev. We'll go to api test.http file and create an HTTP call to mark task as complete. After we make the call, we get a task back that has value in the completed on field. If we make a call again, we can see that we got an error because the task has been already completed. So the code works. Next, let's work on the task DTO, or data transfer object, because what we are currently returning to the user may not be exactly what we want to return. Let's go ahead and create dto.d.ts file in src folder. In this file, let's create task DTO type. It will have properties ID, user ID, project ID, name, description, due date, completed on, and priority level. As you noticed, we decided not to expose to the user created at field, and we also added priority level field that can be high, low, or null. Let's make some updates to the task entity so we can return the task the way the DTO tells us. In task entity, let's create a method setPriorityLevel. This method is basically checking if due date exists on a task. If it does, and it is within 1 day from today, then the task priority level is high, otherwise it's low. Now let's define priority level getter with a getPriorityLevel that will return setPriorityLevel method call. Finally, let's define sDTO method on the task entity. In this method, we need to map task entity fields into the plain task DTO object. However, there is a way to automate it with a class transformer package using instance to plain method. Unfortunately, this method returns a record string any type, so the best thing we can do is to cast it as a task DTO type. In order to tell class transformer to exclude created at field and add priority level field, we will use decorators. Let's go to tsconfig.json file and turn on decorators, setting experimental decorators property to true. Next, we will add exclude decorator to created at property and pass it to plain only true. This means we want to exclude created at only when we are converting our entity to a plain DTO. When we create an entity from an object provided by the repository, it will keep created at property. We will also add expose decorator to the priority level getter and pass it name priority level. This exact property appears on the DTO. There are other useful decorators you can use when working with a class transformer library. For example, at date will convert a property to the date type. To learn more how to use class transformer, check out its documentation. Finally, let's import the decorators and instance to plain method from class transformer at the top of the task entity file. Now, let's jump back into the task controller and return task as DTO in the response of mark task as completed function. We will need to update other functions in the tasks controller so they return task DTO as well. Let's update getTask and list tasks together, and you can do the rest on your own. After the methods are updated, let's make sure the dev server is running and head to API test.http file to test our work. Let's send request to getTasks endpoint. As you can see, the tasks are returned in the DTO format. If we get a task by ID, we can see the same thing. The task doesn't have created at property and has an additional property priority level that we calculated on the fly. So our refactoring worked. And this is how you can introduce entities to more effectively execute business logic and DTOs to control what data is exposed to the client. When using entities, you will have to be sure they integrate well with a repository. If you want to learn how to implement repository pattern in your project, please watch this video next.